who's winning and who's up shit creek without a paddle. This is your stop for unbiased election projections with BS free talk, analysis, and one cranky politico's insight into the very future of the world you live in. Broadcasting from the gateway to the motherlode in Waterford, California. This is the Election Recon Podcast. And now, he's carpet-bombing partisan zealots back to the Stone Age by delivering cold, hard reality to the fanatics first class. Your host, Army veteran, political operative, and election junkie, Josh Whitfield.
Welcome to Election Recon. It is episode 6 of the full-length Election Recon podcast. I'm Josh Whitfield, and it is Saturday, October the 31st, 2020. It is Halloween night here in the United States, and it is just 3 days until Election Day in America in these states united. I'm Josh Whitfield. Welcome. Happy Halloween to all of you. Again, I want to start the show off by reminding everyone I understand that our updates have been a little choppy heading into Election Day in terms of getting them out, but those of us that work on this project here at Election Recon, we all have day jobs, none of us make any money, and we are interested in bringing you quality content, not just throwing BS quantity content, bullshit stuff at you. So we want to take the time to do it right. We're very passionate about it, and we do appreciate those of you who write in demanding that we send you updates. We appreciate your patience and understanding as well. So big show. We have a big show for you tonight. Like I told you last week, Pastor Mike Douglas, he's a broadcaster. He anchors the political coverage at KFIV 1360 Power Talk Radio here in the Central Valley. He will be my special guest tonight, and I look forward to bringing him on the phones here in just a little bit. We have a big show. I'm going to talk about the election in the third segment. We're going to answer a few of the questions that you guys have sent in to us. All that's going to be done, but a very, very big show tonight. It's going to be I expect you have two radio voices and personalities, and Mike Douglas and I, so it probably is going to go long for the 6th time in a row, much to the angst of producer Lauren, but we're going to try to push through it. We're going to go into the state of the race here in election 2020 right out of the gate. I'm not going to do any polling reports. The polling dump is just too large. The polls are all over the place. I talked about it in the last update. The polling is it's a little crazy right now. So here's the state of the race for the presidency of the United States. We're going to start first tonight with the Real Clear Politics aggregate polling comparison of 2016 to 2020. Joe Biden now up 2.1% as compared to Trump, Clinton in 2016. Trump, Biden here. Biden now up 2.1% against that polling comparison in the race here in 2020. Significant increase for Biden here in the aggregate battleground polling. The RCP national average of the race, Joe Biden down a little bit, now at 7.8% in the national polling averages according to RCP. Taking a look now at 538.com's forecast model, that's Nate Silver's forecast. He has it 10 in 100 now, 10 in 100 or a 10% chance of President Trump winning re-election, 89 in 100 or 89% chance of Joe Biden winning the election, and 1 in 100 or a 1% chance of a 269 tie. Their projected share of the electoral vote, 349 for Biden, 189 for Trump. And the projected share of the popular vote, 53.3% for Biden, 45.5% for President Trump. Moving now to electionprojection.com. They still have it 307 for Biden in the electoral vote, 231 for President Trump. And their projected share of the popular vote now 49.1% for Joe Biden, 45.9% for Donald Trump. Moving now to RedEaglePolitics.com. His update has it 248 electoral votes projected for Donald Trump, 212 for Joe Biden. His projected share of the popular vote is 51.4% for Joe Biden, 47% for Donald Trump. Taking a look now at statespoll.com. That update, a huge movement for Donald Trump. Statespoll.com has it 322 projected electoral votes for President Trump, 216 for Joe Biden. No toss-up states today in states poll projections. Taking a look now at our model here at Election Recon. We have had one model shift since our last update, and that is going to be the state of Arizona. It moved today in our model. It moves back. It flipped back from tilt Biden to tilt Trump. That's an 11 electoral vote swing into President Trump's column. The Election Recon projection scoreboard for the presidency of the United States is now 278 for Joe Biden, 260 for President Trump. Taking a look now at the Election Recon projected forecast for the presidency of the United States, our simulations have it 58 in 100, or a 58% chance of a Joe Biden victory, 41 in 100, or a 41% chance of a victory for President Trump. We also have it 1 in 100 for a 269-269 tie. Our projected share of the popular vote now 51.1% for Joe Biden, 47% even for President Donald Trump. Taking a look now at the state of the race for the U.S. Senate. The Election Recon projection scoreboard stands 51 projected Senate seats for Republicans, 49 projected Senate seats for the Democrats. Moving now to the U.S. House of Representatives. The Election Recon projection scoreboard stands at 239 projected House seats for Democrats, 196 for Republicans. Taking a look at governors' mansions across the United States, our Election Recon projection scoreboard for governors' mansions stands at 27 in favor of being controlled by Republicans, 23 for the Democrats. Moving now to state legislative races across the country. First, upper chambers or Nebraska's unicameral chamber. Our Election Recon projection scoreboard stands 29 projected chambers to be in control of Republicans, 21 projected to be in control of the Democrats. Moving now to lower chambers. The Election Recon projection scoreboard stands at 27 projected chambers to be in control of Republicans, 22 projected to be in control of the Democrats. That is the state of the race as we see it here at Election Recon. Saturday night, just 72 hours to go until election results actually start coming in. Of course, those are the only results. That's the only poll that matters. Your actual votes in America. Now I'm being told on the phone, ready to go for what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting interview, is Pastor Mike Douglas, the anchor for political coverage for KFIV 1360, of which I am his wingman for the election coverage for KFIV 1360 AM. And without further ado, let's go to Pastor Mike Douglas on the phones. Joining us now on the Election Recon podcast is the one, the only Pastor Mike Douglas here from the Modesto, California area. Mike is also the anchor of KFIV 1360 AM election coverage, and I, of course, am his wingman as we explained in the earlier segment. Mike, it is a privilege and honor. I have been looking forward to having you on since the beginning of the Election Recon podcast. My friend, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, great to be with you, Josh, and congratulations on this. You're doing well with it. Really respect what you're doing.
Well, I definitely do appreciate that, Mike. You're somebody that I look up to in this business. You've been doing it a lot longer than me, of course, broadcasting and hosting, and including that, you are a man of the cloth. You are a broadcaster. You do so many things. So as always here at Election Recon, when we bring a guest on the show, this is the You Plug You, and I don't think there's anybody who's more equipped than that amazing radio voice you have. Please give our listeners the history. Give us the story of Pastor Mike Douglas.
Yeah, Josh, I've really had an eclectic life. Really, my early training, my Bachelor of Arts, was in broadcast journalism. I wanted to go out and change the news reporting industry and to do well in it. That was in the late 1970s, and I soon found out that they really weren't interested in good reporting, even at that time. In fact, one of the greatest, and I grew up in the L.A. area, so and if you grew up in the 1970s in L.A., you know the station, but it was the biggest FM station that all of us teenagers listened to. But anyway, I wound up auditioning for them, and the gal who was the news director says, I really don't care what you say. I just care how you say it. If you make it golden, I really don't care what you say. And that was like I had taken a knife and it got stabbed in the back. I thought, that's not what I signed up for. That's not journalism that I understood, where you get at least three sources, you do your due diligence, and you push your best out there. So I was really discouraged, and so I went back to something I'd been involved in since I was 14, and that was law enforcement. I had been a law enforcement explorer with Pasadena Police Department, and so I went into law enforcement for 10 years with 3 cities in Southern California, then went into hazardous materials investigations. I got tired of glowing in the dark after a while, in that industry, and then had the privilege of getting into the Governor's Office of Emergency Services Urban Search and Rescue Program as an assistant chief, and we were a leader in California. And I know USAR has 2 meanings. One is the reserves for the Army, but the other USAR is Urban Search and Rescue. And I was privileged to be involved in that with the California system and also with FEMA internationally as well. Went all over the country in terms of rescuing people from earthquakes and hurricanes and various things where they need to be rescued in an urban environment. And then later on became the deputy chief for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services in charge of fire and rescue. In the midst of that, God just kind of placed a surprise mid-course, midlife change there. And after 6 months of my wife and I really praying about that and talking about it, I gave all that up. I gave my retirement up, and I took a huge pay cut and went into full-time vocational ministry in Modesto. And before that, I didn't even know what a Modesto was, Josh. But so I've been here, I don't know, almost 25 years now, I guess. And but I've been able to put everything I've done into work in vocational ministry. I still get to do the broadcasting. I get to get out and meet with people. My heart is to get out in the community and mix it up with people and benefit the community and connect and build relationships. I'm not into, staying in the 4 walls of an office. That's not me. So we, about almost 20 years ago, we started a ministry called Advancing Vibrant Communities for the purposes of getting people out of their homes, out of their churches, out of the 4 walls of wherever they are, and getting them into the community to serve the needs of others. And we've been doing that for a little over 18 years now. That's my main gig, but I get to do these wonderful little things like do broadcasting with you on both podcasting and commercial radio. So I've been able to put everything I've done in life to work in my current gig. So I appreciate that opportunity and appreciate the opportunity to chat with you right now.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're really excited to have you on the show. Your resume is just distinguished across the board there. And I think it's fair to say that no one's probably heard of Modesto until Scott Peterson or Jeremy Renner or Timmy Oliphant. So,
Right, exactly.
And most recently, we've been put on the map by Star Trek, the new Star Trek animated series. One of the main stars, Ensign Boimler, on that animated series. That character born and raised in Modesto, California. So all of us who are closet Trekkie fans, we're pretty excited about that around here.
Yeah, that's significant. By the way, I also in the 80s did an animated series called Robotech, and I played an evil invid alien who liked to blow up humanoids, and eventually the main humanoid hit me with some kind of a laser beam and blew me up, and that ended my cartoon career.
Man, I hate it when those laser beams hit you center mass.
No,
it's never a good thing.
Never a good thing.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that you were in Robotech. I played a game since I was 9 years old called Mech Warrior. I met a lot of good friends on that, so I know some of my Mech Warrior buddies out in the world listen to this podcast, so I imagine they're going to be excited that I'm interviewing somebody that played a character in Robotech. So that's very interesting. Now, just to swing back to some relevancy here for the Election Recon podcast, it's relevant because you and I have been tasked for almost a year now to cover this crazy election here in 2020, and it's surreal, anxiety-inducing, a bit crazy that this election is almost over now. We are right up against it, and you and I will be tasked with covering the election on KFIV Tuesday night.
Yeah, and Josh, I think it really is a defining moment for the country. I know we often say that, well, this election is, the most critical election ever. I think this is probably one of, if not the most critical election ever, because I think for our culture in the United States of America, it will define for a long time who we are. It will define whether we are a constitutionally based civil, Bill of Rights based, rule of law based society, or whether we are a power based society of governance. And I think the ramifications are pretty sobering. What really disturbs me, I guess, Josh, is looking, and I should not look at social media, but I look at social media a lot, and I see people splatting emotion all over the place without engaging in reason, without listening to other points of view to see why other people think the way they do, and then to be able to coexist and to carry on what we do in this United States of America, to disagree without being disagreeable. We're not doing that right now, and that is very concerning to me. And so I think what happens Tuesday night is going to be a fork in the road, possibly. And no matter which candidate you're looking at, my encouragement to people is to think, to look at the facts, research, listen to other opinions. And then think about those facts, form opinions about those facts, consider them, what are your beliefs about those facts, and then look at our emotional responses to all those facts. And then when you put all those three together, maybe we have something reasonable and we have an intelligent way to vote. But if we're just relying on our emotions, I think we're in deep wahooey.
Yeah, I think I generally agree with that. Going back to your point about social media and the media, a friend of mine this morning, I woke up this morning, a friend from Scotland sent me a video about the whole Supreme Court situation and the insanity in the U.S. Senate, and it was a video from John Oliver. And listen, I don't. First off, I was flaming after I watched this video. I just abhor partisan zealotry so much. I was just flaming. It was not the way to start my morning. I should have had coffee before I watched that damn video. But, listen, John Oliver he doesn't pretend to be an objective journalist. He's a shrill for the left. He wraps his show up in that. Anyone who watches his show, it's a comedic show. It's entertaining, but it is a bashing of the right and a defense of the left, and I don't think he hides that. That's what he sells. So, but I think the problem is that the media today are becoming John Olivers in this country, and that's not what they should be. And it's very concerning to me because I think this massive historic ideological divide that we find ourselves in today in American society is driven by this media who is struggling to ethically do their job. I mean, we are far from the days, despite them being liberal personally, we are far from the days of Walter Cronkite and Tom Brokaw, who just presented the news and the facts, and they presented, whether they agreed with them or not, they presented both sides of the story. And I think that's really, really being lost. And I think that combined with what's going on in the cesspool that is social media today is a tremendous problem for the nation. What say you?
Yeah, I believe you're right, Josh. I mean, there's a reason why journalism was at one time, I'm not sure it is anymore, but at one time was known as the fourth estate. When I was going through journalism school, and I went through both print journalism and radio and television journalism, if I turned in a story and I didn't have at least 3 different viewpoints in that story, incorporated into that story, they throw it right back in my face and give me an F. I mean, that was the training I had, and I think, and we all have our perspectives. I'm not pretending I don't have a perspective, and a lot of people probably know where I am politically. Some don't. But I think the greatest compliment that we can get is when people who don't know us, maybe listening to us, just talk about an issue and say, "Wow, you presented a very complete picture of that issue, and I really have no idea where you stand on it." That's where journalism ought to be, and we've lost that over the years, and I want to say, Josh, it's not something that suddenly happened. I think it's been happening for 3 or 4 decades, actually, bit by bit. It's being chipped away at. And so I think journalism has a responsibility for where we are today. Now, can that be rectified? I don't know. It's going to take a bunch of 20-somethings saying, you know what, our job is to search for the truth and to present different sides of an issue so that the people can decide, what perspective they want to take. I pray they're coming. I pray there's an army of those young journalists that are coming up that will do that. Right now, journalism is a mess, and the best I encourage people now is, even though it may irritate you, at least listen to the headlines of other news sources that you may not agree with, just so you can hear the other perspective. And in that, sometimes there's a little tiny nugget of truth that does come out, or at least a nugget that we can consider to evaluate an issue and approach it intelligently, just versus approaching it from a partisan viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are just really wise words right there. I think you just hit the nail right on the head. And I just took a shot at John Oliver, and I don't want to be unfair to the left, who he's certainly from the left, but he obviously, I mean, the man's no Jon Stewart, but he's putting together an entertaining show that's full of political opinion and controversy, but it's more of an entertainment thing, less of an actual objective news thing. But even these opinion journalists on I mean, it happens. It's there on the right and the left. I want to be completely clear about that. And these opinion journalists, I think they, even if, I mean, yes, they're there to give their opinion. Yes, they are there to present and fight for a side and all this stuff. But my goodness, you would think that they would have the ethical responsibility and duty to at least present both sides of the argument before they then take down the side of the argument that they want to take down. And we're not seeing that anymore. And with what's going on in social media, I mean, it's been a theme of this show for 6 weeks now, and I've taken a lot of flack for using, the words civil war and civil unrest and all this stuff, but I'm telling you, I've traveled the world, I've fought in the Middle East, and I'm telling you, I truly believe our country is much closer to today's Baghdad with their sectarian and their ideological violence than we've ever been since the mid-1800s, and I think it's a real and serious problem, and I think the media is helping to drive it.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money, Josh. Our system presupposes, I think that's a good word, our system presupposes that there will be divergent views, not just one or two, but maybe three or four, and that the system was built so that we can coexist and have governance in the midst of that. And what I see right now, even, and I don't care whether it's liberal or conservative media, this business of putting someone on the left, someone on the right, or two on the left, two on the right, and having them talk over each other and create this cacophony drives me nuts. It's like, and I don't mean to slam him because he had a successful career, but it's like a Jerry Springer style of journalism where you just, debate is having people shout at each other and talk over each other and to try to get more clicks and that people kind of enjoy SmackDown Tuesday night, watching the news. That is non-productive. I think we need to get back to having intelligent conversations, reasonable conversations, and without this ridiculous cancel culture where it's not about let me hear the other side and let me respond to it. No, we have to tear down the other side. We have to destroy the other side we have to bury the other side so that it can never rise again. That is not the American way. I don't believe that's what the founders had in mind, and it's going to take a lot of very disciplined, principled leaders and voters to right that ship. Right now, I think reason is on life support and maybe being loaded into a hearse and heading for the graveside. We need to get back to be able to reason with each other without destroying each other.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really can't agree more with that. I mean, that has to be a message where reasonable voices like this show here at Election Recon, but it has to be so many others, have to push back against this tribalism and this lack of reason and human dignity for one another right now. It's insanity across the whole political spectrum. It's nuts. And both sides are responsible for it. It's not just one side or the other. And, we're in big trouble if we don't figure out how to steer the ship and the moral compass back to pointing north again. I want to transition now a little bit to the election. Of course, you and I are going to be covering the election again for KFIV 1360 on election night. And I'll let you plug all the details of our show and our coverage at the end of our interview here. But we've been talking about it here for the last couple weeks, that there's really two diverging narratives coming out of the election prediction or projection circuit, for lack of a better word. You have these professionals out there, these professional prognosticators, the mainstream media, who have these models showing Joe Biden a 90 to 95% chance to win the presidency, Democrats 75 to 80% chance to capture the Senate, and almost 100% chance that they're going to hold the House. I generally agree with the House projections, but you have all these polls, and I call these the mainstream pollsters the national polling complex, a little dig there from the defense industrial complex. And these polls this year, man, they're insanity. They're all over the place. And, the empirical data that we do have, the voter registration data, the early vote, looks fairly healthy for Republicans right now, in contradiction of the polls and the national polling complex and the mainstream media. And so you have a smaller group of voices out there that are pushing a second narrative that this race is going to be much closer than the professionals are saying it's going to be. And I should point out that conservatives should take the early voting and the voter registration data with a grain of salt, because especially with early voting, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats dominated the early vote in 2016, and they still lost the election. It's not a be-all, end-all, to be sure. However, it doesn't point to double-digit wins for Joe Biden. Maybe we are all wrong, those of us that are in the second narrative, and the professionals are right in the first narrative. But I'm kind of curious to what you think. How do you think the election is shaping up heading into Election Day?
My expectations, Josh, are what you stated just a moment ago. I think it's going to be a very, very tight race. I could be totally wrong. For those who say, well, this will be a rerun of 2016, I think there are too many new factors in the mix so that it's not going to be a rerun of 2016. It's going to be its own very individual expression of the body politic. I think it is going to be very tight, and I think there are going to be a lot of surprises. And so, as we cover that, Josh, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to be looking at diverse points of view, and some of those will be expressed during the night. And the purpose for that is not just to be fair for the sake of being fair. The purpose of that is to give us things to think about, and for those of us who, in my realm, who are believers, things to pray about. I think this is going to be a defining moment, but in that defining moment, I think we need to listen very carefully to all of the different perspectives out there, and that'll be one of the things that we'll be doing on election night. I don't think that there are a whole lot of undecideds at this point. You would know better than I do on that. You are excellent at having your thumb on the pulse of polls and all that. I think a lot of people have already made up their minds. But what's going to be interesting to see emerge is how the cacophony of 2020 is going to result in the final couple of bars of this cacophonous symphony. I think it's going to be exciting on one hand and scary on the other, but ultimately we're going to have to learn to live with it one way or the other. And so I think it's good to get all of those points of view, as many points of view in the mix as possible on election night, so that we can hear each other and prepare for whatever's going to be on November 4th. And I think the other issue, Josh, is we may not know many of these things on November 4th. It may be a couple of weeks afterwards, depending on the different states and when they're going to get their counts in.
Yeah, certainly that's going to be a thing. It's very possible that we don't know who is the winner or the projected winner on election night. It may take some days, and hopefully it doesn't take weeks. We'll have to just wait and see. That would not be good for the health of the country. But what I find extraordinary is turnout is going to be high. It's going to be really high, much higher than 2016. And on the surface, conventional wisdom would say that's going to be really great for Democrats, but that would be in like a normal election year. And there's nothing, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs to anyone who will listen. There's nothing normal about this election year. COVID has broken all the normal behaviors and patterns in voting just by itself. And this isn't just an above average turnout year. This is an abnormal turnout year. And so I'm not convinced, because we're looking at 80% turnout, maybe broaching 90. I don't think it's going to be that high, but we're looking at a huge turnout here in the United States. Huge turnout. And I'm not convinced yet that is the be-all, end-all, and that guarantees a win for Democrats. I think it means I'm convinced that that's more evidence that this is going to be a closer race, because everyone in the country is voting. And I think what I find most interesting about that storyline, that narrative, what's most interesting to me is for the first time in a long time, when this election is over, Mike, no one's going to be able to say that we do not know where the American people stand, where the conscience of America is at, because no one's going to be able to say or point to the fact, well, 40% of the country didn't vote. And, I think it's going to be interesting how each side of the political spectrum reacts and handles the results of this election. Because, listen, I think it'll be if President Donald Trump and the Republican Party pull off another upset win, and certainly based off the narrative that the mainstream media and the national polling complex has pushed this cycle, it would be an even more historic upset win than 2016 based off that narrative. And I think it would be a real shock. It would be ice water to the soul. It would be a shock to the system of the American left if in a election that has 80 or 90% turnout, they lose. And what will they do with that? Will that push them? Will that increase? I certainly believe it will. Will it increase the call to abolish the Electoral College if they win the popular vote but lose the electoral vote again? Will it push them into more extremes? And will it push the radical suggestion that we should pack the court into the mainstream? Will there be riots and violence when faced with the prospect that Donald Trump is going to be their president for 4 more years and Republicans retained control of the Senate? I really don't know. I really don't know. And I fear that violence is going to come from the left if the right wins this thing. And I fear the same thing about the right. What happens if the professional prognosticators and the national polling complex and the mainstream media are right, and this is a wave victory for Democrats and Joe Biden in this election? I think it would be shattering and ice water on the soul of the conservative right in this country, because it would completely disprove their mindset, their belief that they possess a silent majority in this country. And I wonder if that will push them, if they will feel they have no other options left but to move into this thing that they have been prepping for years and years. The extremists on the right, I'm talking about, violent militias and stuff like that. And I fear that they may bring violence out of an outcome where they lose, especially if they don't trust the results or the integrity of the election. And we say it time and time again. You've said it, that this is the most, it's cliche to say, and I hate cliches. We always say it's the most important election ever. But really, I agree with you 100%. This is going to be, just because of the turnout alone, this will be the most impactful election of most people's lifetimes. I'm just not convinced that impact is going to be a positive one. I really fear it's going to be a negative one.
Yeah, Josh, you brought up a couple of things that I see something else coming out of that, and that is, regardless of who wins, I think there is going to be a restructuring of conservatism, a restructuring of liberalism, and we're going to see a restructuring of progressivism. I think the Republican Party is going to be restructured. I think the Democrat Party is going to be restructured, because I believe there is not just one party for each. I believe there are factions building. Donald Trump if he wins, I believe, is going to lead the Republican Party into a restructuring, where the old guard, the embedded people, deep state. I don't know. Can I use that word? You've been in the military, Josh. You know that in any big structure, there are unspoken rules. There are power bases that you don't know about until you accidentally bump against them, and then suddenly you recognize they're there. I think there's going to be a little bit of tumult in both of the two main parties, Republican and Democrat, and that regardless of which one wins the presidency, which one either retains the Senate or takes over the Senate, regardless of who's in charge of the House, I think there's going to be some restructuring on both sides, because I don't think there's one voice for any party anymore. I don't think there's one voice on the right, one voice on the left. And when we come and we look at issues like Black Lives Matter, there's not one black voice. There's not one white voice. There are multiple voices, and they're divergent. So I think we have, this mix of things that are brewing and bubbling in this giant cauldron, and I think it's going to be interesting to track and see how the parties may actually change internally as a result of what happens on November 3rd. I could be all wet on that, but it's just something that I sense may happen for both.
Yeah. I mean, in my mindset, I'm really preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. But I've said it over and over again on this show. No matter what happens, we must accept the result as a nation of this election.
Yes.
And we're going to have to move on, and we have to accept the results of this election as a nation. And I say this time and time and time again. Oftentimes in democracy we lose, and the left needs to know that, and the right needs to know that. And the only thing you can do is, if you lose, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go back to work trying to convince the nation that your side is the right side, and you have to win the next election. That is the only way to handle the result of this election.
Yes.
And I want to finish with this. I think, because I agree with you about the factions and restructuring and all this, but I think the biggest detriment to the American politic has been, and there has been no more, there's been no faction on either side or on each party that has been more devastated in the last 2 decades than the moderate factions of both parties. It used to be that you could get this group of people, like the John McCains or the Mary Landrieux or whatever, and this group of people would lock themselves in a cloakroom in the Capitol building, and they wouldn't come out until they had a compromise on how to move legislation forward. And I think some of the best legislation in the history of the country has come out of these compromises where both sides felt they got screwed a little bit. But these pieces of legislation were passed in the national interest, but there's so few moderates left. Maybe Joe Manchin from West Virginia, maybe Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Susan Collins from Maine, but man, you can count them on one hand, and I think that's a huge detriment. Because you used to have this group of moderates that could be the adult in the room and battle the more radical factions and play referee between the more radical factions from each party. And I think that's really concerning because, the hate, the vitriol, the animosity between the two political ideologies in this country, it's just their voices seem to be so much louder today. And there's nobody in the room to stand in between these two very fired up radical sides of each party right now.
Yeah, I agree. I would think of another name, Joe Lieberman.
Yeah, good name. Great name. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, you think who was the Speaker of the House? Thomas O'Neill at the time of
Tip O'Neill.
I'm sorry, Tip O'Neill, and those on the right and the left could get together and fight it out, but at the end they could have dinner together, and there was a common goal of what's best for the country. And we may have different ways of getting there, and there are some things that we may disagree on, but we can find, and in my pastoral view, there are things called points of grace. And those are where the concerns of all people, the concerns of God, the concerns of the state all converge. And so just a quick metaphor. I know we're short on time, but a quick metaphor. Let's just say we have an alleyway, and this is actually a real thing that happened in Modesto. Let's say we have an alleyway where there are no street lights. It's dark. And consistently, there are drug dealers and prostitutes and violence going on in that alleyway. One of the major reasons being there's no light and it's all happening in the darkness. Well, whether we're conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican or, whatever, black or white or whatever, we can all agree on one point of grace there, and that is we all wish there was a light in that alleyway so that we could get, it would dispel a lot of this nefarious activity. And so a lot of people came together who had divergent viewpoints, and they partnered with local government, and they got lights in that alleyway, and the crime went down. So I think there are many issues like that we can agree upon, but it's almost, today it's almost a sense of it is verboten to agree with the other side, even if we agree on the outcome, that it's a worthy thing. And let me just say, I'm going back to Amy Coney Barrett being sworn in. Here's a mother of 7, 2 Haitian adoptees, and a special needs child, a woman of jurisprudence and a respected lawyer, a respected justice, and being sworn in by a black man who is, I think, the dean of the Supreme Court, the longest-serving justice, Clarence Thomas. In America, we need to look at that and say, that in and of itself is cause for hope for America, that America can grow, it can readjust from injustices and inequities. And to simply criticize Amy Coney Barrett because of the guy who nominated her, to me, is very depressing. I can look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg and say, I didn't agree with a lot of her philosophy. I didn't agree with some of her decisions. Some I did agree with. But you know what? After she died, I can acknowledge that she became an American icon, and she was accomplished, and she is worth affirming as an historical figure in American history, even though I didn't agree with her. We're losing that ability to look at the other side and say, I'm going to affirm you because of this stance you took, or I'm going to affirm you just because you have things in your life and you've done things that are worth affirming. We've lost that. It's become the cancel culture. It's become black and white. You're either with us or against us, and if you're against us, you have to be squashed. That, to me, is dangerous, and I'm hoping we recover from that after November 3rd.
Yeah, I really hope so, too. I was disgusted, absolutely disgusted on social media and in some parts in the media of conservatives who were giddy, dare I say, celebrating the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was the liberal lion of the court, a highly intellectual woman, certainly a qualified Supreme Court justice, and people were some people were celebrating the death of this woman who gave a lifetime of service to the nation, and that's appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And at the same time, with the new Justice Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett, she's being condemned. That I found disgusting some of the things the left said about her, calling her a white colonizer because she adopted 2 Haitian children, condemning her for her faith, pretty much attacking her before she's even done anything whatsoever. And I noticed this week, Mike, she had the opportunity to cast a decisive vote on 2 cases that involved the election, and she did the responsible thing and said, I've only been here at the Supreme Court for 8 minutes, and it wouldn't be responsible for me to cast a vote. So she recused herself, and it was absolute deafening silence from these people on the left who attacked her and who did not say, you know what, wow, that was responsible. Maybe we were wrong about her. Maybe we shouldn't have been condemning this woman beforehand and her integrity. It's a real problem.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's just total hypocrisy of the left. It's insanity. I digress. We are over time, Mike. I really do appreciate it. You and I, of course, again, will be covering election night for KFIV 1360 Power Talk. Go ahead and plug our show that we're going to do Tuesday night.
Yeah, a privilege to work with you, Josh. By the way, you bring a lot of expertise that is so important, and I really, really appreciate that. We'll be on the air beginning at 8 o'clock Tuesday night, November 3rd, and we'll be there for 3 hours from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., and we'll be having interviews with different people who watch elections. We'll be getting their opinions. We'll be talking to people who understand polls. We'll be talking to some liberals. We'll be talking to some conservatives. We'll be talking to people about the propositions here in California, and we'll also be tracking a lot of the local elections, for example, in Modesto and Stockton. So it's going to be a panoply of election material. We're going to be giving focus to all of it, from the local elections to the national elections. It's going to be a wild ride, my friend, but we're looking forward to it and invite people to join us, and that'll be on AM 1360 KFIV. That's Power Talk 1360 KFIV coming out of Modesto. But the signal reaches down to Merced, way above Stockton, way to the west, way to the east. So we hope you'll join us, or you can even stream it on am1360.com.
Yes, absolutely. And for our international and national listeners to this show, Election Recon, if you are interested in Mike and mine's coverage of election night in America, you can also get the show on the iHeartRadio app, or again on KFIV1360.com. The time, of course, is going to be 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And, maybe it's going to provide you with a little respite, a little oasis, dare I say, from all the spin partisan coverage you may find that night. So we hope you certainly join us. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join me here on a Saturday, and I look forward to finishing this wild roller coaster ride we call Election 2020 with you Tuesday night.
Well, thank you, Josh. Appreciate you very much. Thank you, man. It's been a privilege to be on your show here.
That, of course, the one, the only, the best voice I know in radio, Mike Douglas. Mike, thanks for taking the time to have joined me tonight. I appreciate you, and I look forward again to working with you Tuesday night to bring this crazy show we call Election 2020 to a close. I want to talk about the special podcast. We will be having a special podcast of the Election Recon podcast, a full 1 hour length episode on November the 2nd, Monday night. A preview of going into election night, so that will be a special for all of you. I'll talk a little bit about my final predictions, but our final simulations and model projections will be released around 3 p.m. on Election Day on our website and our social media accounts and such. We will bring you the model's final projection here at Election Recon for the state of the race across all levels: President, Senate, House, and state legislative races, governors, etc. So make sure you look forward to that. Just for a note that we will not use any exit poll, or there will not be any data from Election Day itself put in. That model will run with the final early voting data and all the data we have that ends on Monday night. And so that's where the election recon model will end. I'm very excited here in the maiden voyage, the shakedown cruise, as we say, for all you Navy squids out there, to see how our experiment here at Election Recon, does our model work? Does it not work? We're going to find out Tuesday. That's for sure. Again, I just want to point out again that I will be with Mike Douglas covering the election on election night on KFIV 1360 AM, again, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in the United States. You can find us on KFIV1360.com or on your iHeartRadio app if you want a little respite, a little stop at the oasis, a little break from the partisan coverage you're probably going to be watching. We hope that you do join us. Listen, I want to talk just a little bit before we go into the 3 points segment where we answer your questions. I want to talk a little bit about why this election's crazy, why the polls may be wrong, and why anyone out there that's guaranteeing you any type of victory is insane and you shouldn't listen to them. I'm going to talk about how the electorate is shaping up, and then I'm going to go into your questions. But before I forget, the cigar of the show, it's actually my second one because the interview with Mike went so long. I already smoked one. I smoked an Olivia during the interview, and I have gone back to the Rocky Patel Special Reserve Sun-Grown Maduro for this part of the segment. So a double two-cigar show, as we say. So I don't get yelled at by you cigar aficionados for forgetting to tell you what I'm smoking here. With that piece of business out of the way, I want to talk about, I've said it week in and week out, it's all about turnout now. And the turnout is going to be higher than 2016. Of that, we are sure. We're not sure how much higher. It's looking that this could be above 80%, maybe in the mid-80s, maybe even approaching 90%. I don't think the turnout's going to be 90%, but it's going to be a higher turnout election, and as Mike and I talked about in the interview, conventional wisdom would have you thinking that's very good for the left and very good for Democrats. And I would say if this was a above average election, and that's probably true, but there is nothing average about this election year whatsoever. COVID has disrupted all voting patterns. It has all the trends. Everything is a hot mess right now. And I think a lot of what will be bad pollsters, and we'll take a look. Maybe the pollsters are right. Maybe they're not. I'm of the belief that these polls are wrong. It's just a matter of how wrong. The polls can be wrong, and Joe Biden and Democrats can still win. Remember, I'm of the belief, here all of us at Election Recon, we are of the belief that this is going to be a very close, tightly contested election. Here's how the electorate is shaping up. We see the electorate right now as being older and whiter. Young people are not voting in the numbers that the left would have you believe, that the mainstream media would have you believe and are hoping happens. It's just not there. The 18 to 29-year-old vote in 2016 was about 17 to 19% of the electorate, and right now it's only about 9 or 10% share of the electorate. This electorate right now looks older and whiter. Minorities are not voting at the same propensity level as 2016. Listen, I want to talk about a little bit about what looks better for Trump in this electorate and what looks better for Joe Biden in this electorate. Right now, in the early vote, which is the only empirical data we have, Trump appears to be performing better with minorities, blacks and Latinos in particular. Donald Trump is doing worse with women. Joe Biden is doing much better with women, it looks like, in this electorate. Big questions remain with how older and suburban voters are going to go. The pollsters, the mainstream media, the professional prognosticators would have you believe that Donald Trump is in big, big trouble there. And if he is in big trouble with those two voting groups, he's in big trouble. Republicans are in big trouble in this election. We think the data is inconclusive. It may be much tighter with older voters. It may be much tighter with suburban voters than the professionals are thinking. Certainly, if Trump wins, if Republicans win the election, a lot of questions are going to be asked about Joe Biden's decision to really put early lids on for the last 2 weeks on the media, and that's a terminology of when you put a lid on for the media, you've told the media you're not accepting questions or comments or anything like that. You're not going to be communicating with the media for the rest of that day. Joe Biden has put a lot of early lids, some as early as before 12 o'clock Eastern time. A lot of it having to do with the Burisma and his son's situation with the Chinese government and this new laptop, etc. Every time a new story comes out, the Biden campaign has chosen to put an early lid on. I'm not being biased. Those are just facts. I think a lot of questions are going to be asked if Joe Biden loses or if this election was close, if that was a wise decision. And the Biden campaign and many Democrat campaigns across the country have abandoned traditional ground games, while Trump and Democrats have pushed forward with traditional ground games. I think people will have questions about if that was wise. Should the Democrats lose, or should Donald Trump win, or the election's close? You can see the enthusiasm and the traditional ground game out there for Republicans and President Trump just through his rallies and the amount of voter registration data we have and the amount of doors that have been knocked and phones that have been called according to the Republican Party and Republican campaigns. If Donald Trump wins this election, that certainly will have played a part in it. And I think the Biden campaign and Democrats will face a lot of criticism for that decision. On the other side, it seems very clear that the Trump campaign has decided through the end of the election, let Trump be Trump. And he has gone out there in these rallies and been the Trump that he was in 2016. And he said some inflammatory things, some tough things, as he would like to say, some non-traditional political rhetoric has come from him. We'll see if there is Trump fatigue and America is just tired of it. If Donald Trump and Republicans lose, I think there'll be a lot of questions asked about whether or not that was a smart strategy. We're just going to have to buckle up and wait to see what happens. But what we must do, what we have to do, America, okay? Hear me on this. We have to accept the results of the election, no matter who wins or loses. Don't go out and commit violence, riot, burn, shoot, harm other people over an election result. Okay? I'm going to put it like this because I believe it very seriously. If you enact violence due to the result of an election in this country, then I believe you are a traitor, right or left, Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. If you commit violence against others because of a result of a democratic election in this country, you are a traitor to the Constitution and to every value that is America. Very controversial thing I just said, but take that to the bank and cash it, because that is true, point blank, straight up, calling a spade a spade. We have to accept the results of the election. I don't think really. I think there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties because of COVID, because of how this electorate is shaping up. The vast majority, overwhelming majority of American voters are going to vote in this election. It'll be the first time, extremely high turnout, the first time in a long time. And here's why I'm not convinced that may end up being great news for the Democrats. It may be. I don't know. We haven't seen a turnout this high in a very long time. But in my mind, if both sides are turning out at record numbers, that would be an indication that this is going to be a close election, not a blowout election. And I think if it's going to be a wave election on either side, it will mean only one thing, maybe two. But the most likely explanation of a wave election for Republicans or Democrats or a huge win for Biden or a huge win for Trump will be that independents broke for one side or the other by 3-1 margins in either direction. A second cause of a huge wave victory may be that there are a lot more defections from one party or the other voting for the other party that we haven't picked up, and maybe some of these pollsters have. Based on the Gallup numbers, based on the data that I think is a little bit more nonpartisan than a lot of these mainstream media polls out there, I just think both sides are in their corner. There's not a lot of undecideds left. So if independents do vote 3-1, 4-1 for one side or the other, then yes, that could push a wave election. But I'm not convinced that that's going to be the case. I think both sides are pushing out. I think independents are going to be hotly contested. And it's all about turnout now. It's all about turnout. Are you going to get more of your side? Are you going to get more of your potential voters out to the polls? That's all that is left to do now in this election. And that points me out back to that ground game. That ground game and the rallies and the enthusiasm. I think it's advantaged Trump in the late turnout battle over Biden and the Democrats, who have been a little apathetic in their rally and campaign schedules as compared to Donald Trump and the Republicans. Those are just facts. Donald Trump and Republicans are holding way more rallies, way more events, and have not stopped the ground game from summer until today. So that could be good enough to shift this thing 1 to 3 points in many of these battlegrounds. Those are just election facts, and that's something to consider going into Election Day. So without any further ado, since I'm 5 minutes over time, not too bad, Lauren, let's go to 3 points with Josh Whitfield. Let's answer your questions and wrap up this show. I hope you've enjoyed it. The first question comes from Henry from Akron, Ohio. Henry writes, "The polls say the race is close in Ohio, but I believe President Trump is doing even better here in my state than he did in 2016. What do you think will happen in Ohio? Do you think Trump will win big?" Thank you for writing in, Henry. Listen, I truly believe Donald Trump's going to win Ohio. It would take an incredible shift in the polling and the electorate to suggest otherwise. Ohio was one of the biggest missed states in 2016. It was a huge miss by the pollsters. Donald Trump won pretty handily there. I get the sense, and our model believes that Donald Trump is going to win the state of Ohio. It's currently lean in the election recon model, and I believe that's where it ought to be. So, again, we could be wrong, but that's the sense of where I think the race in Ohio is. Thank you for writing in. The next question comes from Lynette from Montgomery, Alabama, and she writes, "Can Doug Jones beat Coach Tuberville? I think it's unbelievable that people would vote out a good man like Doug Jones for an inexperienced football coach. Also, can Democrats take the Senate?" Lynette, thank you for writing in. I'm not going to talk about the qualities or the qualifications of either candidate in Alabama. I lived in Alabama for a year. I know football's a big deal. I'm not really sure if Coach Tuberville, who was the former coach at Auburn University, I believe, in Alabama. I know football is a huge, college football especially, is a really big deal in that state. I don't know. Listen, that's up for you, the voters in Alabama, to decide. We certainly believe here at Election Recon that Tuberville is going to move Democrat Doug Jones out of the seat. We think Alabama will have 2 Republican senators once again. Alabama is a very, very tough state for Democrats to win statewide. It's certainly mathematically possible for Doug Jones to defeat Tuberville. We just don't think it's likely going to happen. Can the Democrats take the Senate? Of course they can. Most of the mainstream media believes that the Democrats are going to take the Senate by 75-80% chance. Our election recon model does not believe that. We believe that Republicans are on their way to a 51-seat majority. We think that Joni Ernst is doing really well, finishing strong in Iowa. If Joe Biden can defeat Trump in Iowa, then I think Joni Ernst goes down. If Donald Trump wins the state of Iowa, I think Joni Ernst, the incumbent Republican senator there, defeats Greenfield, the Democratic challenger. It's going to be a very close race. We think the slight advantage is to the Republicans and Senator Ernst. Iowa hasn't thrown out an incumbent senator in 36 years. But then again, there's always a first time for everything. So, I think that's the state of the race there for the Senate. The other state that we think Republicans are doing better than the mainstream media is letting on is North Carolina. And again, we think if Donald Trump wins the state of North Carolina, he will carry incumbent Republican Senator Tom Tillis over the line against Democrat challenger Cal Cunningham, who is mired in a really bad sex scandal where he's been caught lying and cheating on his wife. And he was running a campaign of being a stand-up, honest family man. And that image of him has been shattered. Now, if Joe Biden wins the state of North Carolina, it's a pretty good indication that Tom Tillis is going down and Cunningham is going to win. But right now, our model has Donald Trump up in North Carolina. We have Joni Ernst up in Iowa. And that is how, in our model, Republicans are ahead. A very big divergence, our model, from the mainstream media's model. And we think Republicans have about a 55 to 60% chance of holding the Senate, where the mainstream media models think it's 75 to 80, the Democrats take the Senate. So I hope I answered your question there. We're just going to have to wait and see, Lynette, what happens on Election Day. The third question comes from Frank from Springfield, Illinois, and he writes, "You only read favorable and easy questions on the podcast. You are some kind of arrogant to say people like Nate Silver, the New York Times, and Cook Political are wrong. They are the smartest guys in the world when it comes to elections, and you don't know shit. You are a pathetic loser stuck in your mother's house pretending to be an expert. Good luck when you are wrong on Election Day." Well, Frank, first off, I can say I'm not a coward, and I'm very happy to read negative questions or comments. Not really a question here, just a statement from you. And listen, man, I wanted to read your statement on the air because if you're right, you deserve to be, I guess, given the credit that I'm wrong and you're right. But I wanted you, Frank, from Springfield, Illinois, to be on the air, to be on the record here at Election Recon for that snarky little comment that you sent in that I'm full of shit and I don't know shit. Because if I'm proven right, you can be sure that I'll probably bring you back up at the end of the election. And, we'll have to wait and see. But Frank, listen, you're entitled to your opinion. We have really thick skin here, man, and we'll find out whether or not those of us here at Election Recon know our shit or not. So thank you, Frank, for writing in. Obviously, you're some type of a fan to follow us, even with such a pithy comment sent in to us. Listen, we want to thank all of you who listen in to our show, who are following Election Recon. We're over 4,000 Twitter followers now, almost at 1,950 followers on YouTube, or subscribers. Our podcast is up to 1,200 listens, unique downloads and unique listens per day. It's amazing. It's exceeded all of our expectations for just being here for 6 weeks and not like a year and a half like these other Pro-Am shows out there and YouTube channels and all that. Thank you so much for your support. Of course, if you like our content, if you like our show, you can find us on social media at Election Recon on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. You can write into the show at electrecon, elect singular, recon@gmail.com. Your question may get answered on the show. We always answer all written questions back. Any question that doesn't get answered on the show gets a response from us. Eventually, first come, first serve. And of course, continue to follow the Election Recon podcast. You can follow us on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. please tell your friends, neighbors, that this is indeed the oasis of reality here in the desert of election partisan zealot chaos that is out there. We hope that you find our show a respite from all the partisan nonsense, and we do our absolute best to bring a balanced and fair view of the election, fact-driven commentary. That's what we are pushing for here at Election Recon. Again, we will have a special 1-hour show on Monday the 2nd. I will be with KFIV 1360 AM Tuesday the 3rd, and we will announce whatever schedule we have after the election, because we don't know if the election is going to be decided in short order or if it's going to take days or weeks to come to a final conclusion. But we will endeavor to continue bringing you updates regardless, and this show will continue. Once the election is decided, the weekly shows will continue indefinitely into the future. We are here at Election Recon for the long haul, whether we're right, wrong, or somewhere in the middle. We enjoy doing this, and we hope that you enjoy listening and following us. That's all we have tonight. I'm Josh Whitfield. Happy Halloween. Election Day is 72 short hours away. Buckle up, because it's been a wild ride, and it's going to come to an abrupt halt. You have a very good night. We'll see you next time.